Well, it's interesting because they are so closely related to chimpanzees. They only separated from chimpanzees maybe 1 or 1.5 million years ago, and they were separated by the formation of the Congo River in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the only place that bonobos are found. And so what happened was they were kind of isolated once this river arose, and so you had chimpanzees on one side and bonobos on the other, and neither can swim, and so they evolved independently. And in chimpanzees, males are very much in charge, very dominant, very aggressive, and often lethally so. They commit genocide against other groups of chimpanzees, and they certainly are brutal toward the females when they feel they need to be to keep them in line or whatever. Whereas in bonobos, even though you have very similar proportions, physical differences, so that the male bonobos are bigger than the females, but because the females they form cliques, they stick together with one another. They spend a lot of time maintaining their friendships with other females, and that has allowed them to call the shots. So the male bonobos don't tend to bond with each other, and the females bond very closely. So that's what gives them the upper hand. So what does that mean when you're looking at apes? It means basically who can displace whom when it comes to a good patch of food, or who has the better sleeping sites. You know, these are all markers that scientists use to say which is the dominant sex. And so females are clearly the dominant sex, and they are never seen alone. You don't see like one female bonobo wandering around on her own. They always travel in groups. So they've managed to get kind of control of their own lives by forming these friendships with other females. It's very unusual, but it seems to be something that works, and the males don't seem to particularly suffer for it. So they've been evolving like that for the last, well, at least a couple million years. So that's how scientists know that the females are in charge, because they are the ones that are able to get the best feeding sites. And they're also, females are the ones, when they're going to go out foraging, they tend to take the lead, and in chimpanzees it's the males who generally take the lead. So there are various signs of that sort of social dominance, as it's called. One of the good things for female bonobos, by having this kind of arrangement, there's never been an instance of infanticide, male infanticide. So among chimpanzees, sometimes a new male will come in and he will kill the young of the previous males. This does not happen among bonobos. You don't see the kind of use of infanticide as a male strategy to get the females receptive again. And so it's been something that you can see why, once females were in a position to control their own fates, that this would be something that would have certain benefits to them that would be passed on. It's a very, very unusual situation, though, because the females, the adult females that live together in a group of bonobos, are not related to each other. In most primates, like if you look at monkeys or baboons or so on, the females in a group are almost always relatives, and it's the males who leave when they reach sexual maturity, and they leave and they find another group to join. In the case of bonobos, it's the opposite. The females leave and find another group to join. So they're in a group of females that they're not related to. Nevertheless, they form these very strong cliques, these bonds with each other, that allow them to control their own, who they're going to mate with, to prevent infanticide, and that sort of thing. It seems to be a function of food availability. So chimpanzees tend to live in drier, they're actually found more widespread in different countries, whereas bonobos are only found in this one part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so they are living in what amounts to something of an oasis, something of a kind of a Shangri-La or whatever, of abundant food year-round, whereas for many groups of chimpanzees, where it's drier and there are times when food is scarce, females cannot afford to kind of hang out too much together because they're busy just trying to find enough to eat. And so they go off on their own, they forage on their own, and they don't have the luxury of forming these alliances. So that's the thinking now as to how this got started among female bonobos, because they could all find enough to feed themselves and their offspring, and so they didn't need to kind of just spread out and keep their relationships superficial. So I think that's as good an explanation as any. Ecology generally determines the basic, all other strategies kind of arise from food availability, basically. And so the bonobos just happen to luck out and having a situation where they do tend to have food year-round, enough for everybody. I mean, there are certainly times when it's harder than other times, and they're not like this pacifistic, nice, they fight a lot, like all primates. They like to fight. They fight with each other. They squabble with each other. It's not like it's all just, sort of heaven on earth, but it does tend to be easier for them to feed themselves and their offspring. They don't have to spread out so far. They can stick together. What you do see is that in societies where there's a lot of scarcity, women don't tend to do as well as they do in places where there's more abundance, and so it probably affects that. And now because of our ability to, we can obviously plant and we can have food processing and we can kind of compact calories into these packages forever. It's not so much of an issue, although there certainly are parts of the world where food scarcity is a serious problem, no question. But I do think that we can, as one of the scientists said to me, we're equally related to bonobos and chimpanzees. They're our closest relatives, living relatives, and we're equally related to both of them. And so in theory, we can kind of go one path or another. One of the things I would hate to see is for women, does it have to be that one sex or the other is dominant, or can't there just be a situation where we try to work together? And certainly there are primate species where males and females they're the same size, and they tend to be more egalitarian, and so there's no reason to think we can't do that either. And interestingly, in some societies, the differences the physical differences between men and women are less than in other groups. So that's called a sexual dimorphism, difference between male and female, and you see it differs in different cultures. And the closer that we are in physical size, the more you do tend to see a kind of equality in other areas of life too. So it's almost as though kind of a reflection of what happens in the animal kingdom at large. But I think we can make choices, and we can see what is out there, and we can also say, what does it take for women to feel comfortable in this world? And generally speaking, I would argue that if women support each other, I think it's better not only for women. I think it's also better for men. I don't know what men want. I don't know if men would rather have all the power or whether they prefer to share it. But I tend to think that power sharing makes for a more stable society. I think it makes for more stable conditions for everybody involved. So, when people try to grab all the power, whether it's the rich trying to grab everything or whether it's men, it seems like that sets up a kind of a instability. So I would say that if we can learn any lessons from other animals, it would be, what do we need to do to kind of encourage cooperative behavior? How can we widen the circle of inclusion? These are the things that I think we can actually look to other species for some ideas. And certainly forming friendships and supporting each other is always a good idea.
Why don't you ask the Lord God about that? Oh, I forgot. You're the New York Times. You are the magazine that printed that God is dead, didn't you? But still, nevertheless, the Lord God is the one responsible for that. He has the answers. Ask him the question.
Yeah, I noticed that in certain species, females run the show. I guess because maybe in some species the females could be more overprotective. I don't know. You would think that the males would be overprotective in a way. But yeah, it's rather interesting.